Hey over there, Joel and Swax.
And Joy Nightingale.
And today we have landed right here in Exeter, Rhode Island. Now, today we have some legends to share with you. Because did you know that there are vampires here in Rhode Island? Well, maybe not really, but in the 1700s to the 1800s, people did think there were vampires here. You'd be like, really? Well, the thing is, when there's things people can't explain, it must be supernatural. And we are going to tell you some cases of people that were believed to be Rhode Island vampires. Some legends, some lore, some real facts. Some you can't even find the real facts. But it's interesting stories, and we're going to share it with you. Hopefully you like that kind of thing. If you do, you should like this video. We're always traveling the country, going to weird roadside attractions, oddity spots, telling you these legends, these stories. So if you haven't done already, we greatly appreciate it if you subscribe to our channel. We have over 500 videos up on this channel. That's what it is. Joe and Joy Have Landed is a channel. It is all of our adventures. And comment down below, what is the weirdest legends in your local area? Like folklores, cryptids, stuff that people might not know about and we should investigate. All right, but it's time to do this. Step right up. Let's go for this ride. First spot we will be beginning here in Exeter is at Rhode Island Historical Cemetery number 14. Now this wasn't really a public cemetery, as we can see. It is have fallen into some disrepair, hidden, tucked in the woods, right around residential properties. This actually was the Tillinghast family plot. Now, the first person we were going to talk to is a girl named Sarah Tillinghast. There's a lot of legend between Sarah. We don't know how much is true. There's so many versions of the same story. But the story more or less goes, Sarah passed away at the age of 21 to consumption. If you don't know, consumption is what we call tuberculosis now. It's a terrible disease. It's a bacterial lung disease. So imagine you're wilting away, she's coughing up blood. This poor girl passes away, age of 21. This is where the legend gets tricky. There's lots of different versions of the story. The one that we feel is the truth is that she passed away in 1799. There is some that say she passed away in 1786, but it just doesn't line up the numbers when she was supposedly born and everything. And the stories also go that Sarah was one of 14 kids. That might be an exaggeration. They said because of this, 7 family members died because of this. That might be an exaggeration. From what we could see, the legend has it that Sarah passes away from this consumption. A few after that, she has a brother named James. James starts to show the same symptoms. And first his family doesn't believe him, but he's getting sicker and sicker. And he says, at night, the spirit of Sarah visits him. She sits on him, and that's where it hurts. And she's sort of like stealing his energy. Well, James sadly passes away from this virus. And 2 more of the Tillinghast kids pass away. And like I said, this cemetery is the family cemetery. So those kids and Sarah are buried here. So this family, there was a bunch of kids. Father's name was Stutley Tillinghast, and the mother was Honor. Now, he was a farmer. He had orchards. And the father, Stutley, had a vision one night, a dream, that half his crops died, half the orchard, and he didn't know what this dream was about. And later, when his kids started to pass away, he figured this dream was foreshadowing a premonition that his family sadly was dying. 4 of his kids now have passed away, and his wife comes down with the consumption. Now, the town starts panicking, saying to him, like, what's happening? Because other people in town were getting sick, and they figured because they were getting sick, it must be Sarah. Sarah must be why everyone's getting sick. That must be why the wife is getting sick. So they said there was only one solution for this. Now, this is a lot of the legend. We don't know how much this is true, but Stutley went with a farmhand, a guy named Caleb, and they came to the cemetery. They didn't want other people to do it. He wanted to do it himself, and he dug up the grave of his daughter, Sarah. When they dug up Sarah's body, legend has it, even though Sarah passed away 18 months before, that she looked like she just could have died yesterday. The body was still fine. And they figured, oh no, yep. The term vampire wasn't really being used in the situation. Later, the term vampire, they just said it was some sort of paranormal thing. She was managed to still be alive, even though she wasn't sucking energy. It wasn't like what we think of vampires, where they're walking around biting people's necks. Not that kind of vampire. But the solution to cure this was he had to cut out his daughter's heart. They burnt the daughter's heart. And were able to rebury the body. And legend has it, after this happened, his wife got better. She didn't die of the consumption. That is the legend of Sarah. Now, mind you, this is 1790s. This is the first story of a vampire here in Rhode Island. Now, you might think, how many more? Well, next story we're going to tell you happens almost 100 years later. We're talking close to the 1900s, and people still thought there was vampires. We do want to pay respect to the people here in the cemetery. Sadly, we don't know which of the graves is Sarah's. We were looking up a lot of the information, and from what we could see, a lot of people said these little headstones that aren't really that existing anymore were Sarah. But from the research I was doing, there is another Sarah buried here, but she passed away mid 1800s. But there is this tombstone here that is S. Tillinghast. Don't know the full name, and we also don't know the dates. So I think one of these tombstones right here would be Sarah. And next to it was a J. Tillinghast, so it could have been Sarah and James because they died a few months apart. But in all reality, we know which ones aren't. But, like, see here we have another Sarah B, but it says wife. Obviously, it wasn't the wife. Wasn't John. And if you wanted to come pay your respects to this Tillinghast cemetery, look for Sarah for yourself. We're going to show you. You could totally miss the cemetery. There is this sign right here that we showed showing the entrance to the cemetery. But other than that, when you're out in the road, there is a lot that you might not even realize this. So the story does get a little confusing because we can't separate legend from truth. Now, we believe that Sarah passed away in 1799. Some legends say she passed away in 1776, which makes no sense because she wasn't born till 1777. Joy found some proof of that we will share with you. And her brother James was born. When was James born, Joy?
1786.
And James was born 1786. And mind you, here is the kid that passed away started getting sick right after Sarah passed away. So he was only like a 13-year-old kid that sadly passed away to this tuberculosis outbreak that was happening. Joy was doing some research and she found some old papers, and we see Stutley Tillinghast, born November 24th, 1741. He married Honor Hopkins, November 22nd, 1762. But when we come down to close to the bottom, Sarah, born October 10th, 1777. So that's why we figured the legend that says she passed away in 1799 would be correct, because they said she was around 21 years old. And the grave next to who we think are the two kids, that's tilted over. This is the mother honor. Right here, this little residential road. Big houses in the back. We can sort of see joy in the woods, but this is it. You turn off the main road, which is Route 102. You come down and it's right on the right-hand side, tucked into the woods. You got to know what you're looking for. The way we figured it was this little curb break. This is what you're going to look for to see where the cemetery is. So, we're here to talk about the most famous of these Rhode Island vampires, Mercy Brown. Now, when I say vampires, no, they weren't vampires. Sadly, there's people that died of tuberculosis, back then known as consumption. But because of mass hysteria, people thought there had to be something supernatural at work, and it has to be vampires. And the word vampire wasn't even used initially to describe it. They just knew there was something else wrong. Vampires were a thing in literature. The term vampire was created and in the English language in 1732. It could be traced back to around 1000 when it was in like Russia and areas like that. But 1732 English language actually used the term vampire for the first time. Now, Mercy was supposedly so famous because she was the last of the Rhode Island vampires, that when newspapers did come out calling her a vampire, it's believed that Bram Stoker, when he passed away, people discovered these newspaper articles talking about Mercy Brown, and that those articles help inspire the character Lucy in Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now, Mercy Brown, like the other story we told you, sadly sort of follows the same footsteps. A lot of the family died because of tuberculosis, and they didn't know how. Here we have Mercy's father, George T. Brown, and Mercy's mother, Mary E. Now we see Mary died first, December 8th, 1883. After Mary died, their daughter Olive, Mary Olive here, sadly was the second one that passed from tuberculosis. She died in 1884. They also had a brother named Edwin. In between the time of Mary Olive, the sister of Mercy, passing away, and before Mercy passed away, Mercy ends up passing away in 92. So there is an 8-year gap. There is time in between it. But her brother Edwin does come down with tuberculosis. They send him to Colorado because there were sanitariums to help cure this. And he was in Colorado for 2 years. When Mercy passes away, Edwin came back. They thought he was cured, but he starts getting sick very quickly. The consumption's overtaking him, and the townspeople are in hysteria. And they go to the father, you know what? It's either your wife or one of your 2 daughters. She's sucking the energy out of Edwin. She is the one from beyond the grave killing Edwin. George didn't know what to do, but he had to appease these town folks. So what ends up happening is Mercy's actual doctor when she was alive is a guy named Dr. Metcalf. So Dr. Metcalf comes here with 4 locals. They dig up Mercy and the 2, and Mary E. and Mary Olive. And obviously Mary and Mary Olive have been buried for 9 and 8 years consecutively. So their bodies have decomposed. Now, Mercy, she passed away in January. They dug them up in March. She hasn't been dead that long. The very cold winter. In fact, we heard stories that she might have actually been in a crypt at the back of the cemetery beforehand. But Mercy, the body hasn't had time to decompose. And people see that she hasn't decomposed and went, she must be a vampire. Well, they didn't use the term vampire. And the doctor's trying to explain, probably not. Everything that they discover, he could say could be natural science. There was blood in her heart, so they said that must make her, that she's sucking Edwin's blood. and that her hair and nails grown. But they also said that that's just natural. Your hair and nails grow after you pass away. But they believed she was a vampire. And they were like, okay, well, we'll do what we have to do. So they cut out Mercy's heart and liver. Supposedly they burnt it on a stone here in the cemetery. Could it be the stone right over there? Could be, we don't know. They take the ash, they mix that ash with water, make it almost like a soup, and they have Edwin drink it. Yes, that's right. Using his sister's ashes, some cannibalism, and they were like, this is going to cure Edwin. We saw Edwin's tomb. It didn't cure Edwin. Tuberculosis killed Edwin. And what I think is sad about the whole story is George Brown here passed away in 1922. So we're talking 30 years after Mercy passed away. Now, with that, in 1921, they started giving vaccines for tuberculosis. They figured out what this was. We came at a vaccine. So he lived to point to know what actually took his whole family. No, it wasn't a vampire. Know that now people aren't going to deal with this anymore, because people were being vaccinated for what actually took the life of his family. And to me, that's really sad. But some weird things that I think personally, when you take it as just a legend, is that they said with them being vampires, no grass or anything will grow on their plots. And when we look at Mercy, there is no grass. I mean, obviously, it could be rationalized that so many people come to visit Mercy here, that so many people walk there, that's why there's no grass there. But if you come, please be respectful. Because just look at this. Here's a 19-year-old kid that passed away, a terrible death, tuberculosis. Imagine she's coughing up blood, suffering, her body wilts away. She gets buried. She doesn't get to rest in peace because a few months later, they dig her up, chop her body apart, burn it. But then, because of this legend of her as a vampire, people come, and you see this tombstone had to be reattached, and it's now bolted with metal because people thought it was a good idea to really not let her rest in peace, steal her headstone. Thankfully, it came back. But if you want to come visit, come visit. Be respectful. It's an active cemetery. There's a church still there. And just be respectful to this poor girl that died. And it is an interesting legend, but it's just a legend. She wasn't a vampire, even if she's known as the Rhode Island Vampire. And on the far right of the cemetery, we actually have the crypt. It's not being used anymore, but supposedly legend has it that when Mercy passed away, since it was such a cold winter that year in 1892, they couldn't get her body in the ground in January. So Mercy's body first was in here before she got buried. I don't know how long supposedly she was in here before they got her in the ground. But just think, if it was that cold and her body was sitting here, her whole body would have froze. So when they finally buried her, the reason she didn't look like she decomposed at all was she was only there for a few months from her passing till they exhumed her body. But this is one of the explanations why people are saying why her body didn't decompose at all. And if you are looking for Mercy's grave, we're at the Chestnut Hill Baptist Cemetery here in Exeter. You take this church, you just go the main road, not that far in, and you find Mercy's headstone. For our final grave we come today, we are at Rhode Island Historical Cemetery number 2 here in West Greenwich, Rhode Island. Now, this vampire grave is actually a grave of mistaken identity. Like we were looking at Mercy's grave, vandals liked stealing it. Because of the headstone here, people thinking it's a vampire grave. People have stole the headstone, and there is no more headstone. What we are looking for is the center of this cemetery, there is this crypt, and supposedly the grave we're looking for is 15 feet southwest of that crypt, which puts it somewhere over here. We are at the grave of Nelly Vaughn. Nelly Vaughn is a girl who passed away in 1899 from, nope, you didn't guess it, not consumption, not tuberculosis, but pneumonia. Her whole family didn't die, just was some poor girl that passed away from pneumonia. The thing that happened was, in the 1960s, some high school teacher was telling her kids the story of Mercy Brown, but didn't tell all the details. This was a high school in Coventry, Rhode Island, and the students were like, we want to find this vampire grave. And they discovered Nelly's tombstone here, who was also 19 years old when she passed away, and they went, this might be it. And then they read the epitaph, and they went, oh, this is weird. This has to be that vampire grave.
I am waiting and watching for you.
That's what the epitaph said.
That's what it said.
And they went, ooh, that's creepy.
I mean, it does sound creepy.
So they would come here, and starting in the 60s, they thought Nelly Vaughn was the Rhode Island vampire. They mistaken Nelly Vaughn for Mercy Brown. So she was a mistaken vampire. She wasn't a vampire. But people came, obviously, they stole her tombstone, they broke her tombstone. If you like souvenirs, don't go chip away people's tombstones. Those aren't your souvenirs. Because now Nelly sadly doesn't have that tombstone, doesn't have that epitaph.
I mean,
didn't rest in peace.
I can totally see why, because like looking in here, I do see Tillinghast and I do see Brown.
Yeah, lots of names from the other two graves that we went to. A lot of the families, I guess, big families here in Rhode Island at those times. You see a lot of it.
Yeah, but if you're sending somebody like Mercy Brown, you know, like not even sending anything, but they look it up and they see, oh, it's a Brown type of thing, and then they don't know exactly where.
Yeah. But that was the third of these Rhode Island vampires. Now just think, she passed away in 1899. They didn't think she was a vampire till the 1960s by mistaken identity. No, she just passed away. Strange epitaph. But we've come to Rhode Island. We shared with you the stories of Sarah, of Mercy Brown, and of Nelly.
Yep.
I think we've done what we came to do, Joy.
I think so.
Our mission is complete.
Woohoo.
We have discovered some of these Rhode Island vampires. Hopefully you liked this mission. Hopefully you liked coming along, doing these grave tours, hearing these legends. We enjoyed bringing you along with us.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we could call it
I think so.
Rhode Island Vampires. Been there, done that. Remember, folks, safe travels
Good eats.
and live life.